Well, how can you save money on gas? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Tony Joe's here, as he is every Friday, to take your Car Corner questions. If you got a question today, we're going to be talking quite a bit about some information that you need to know. So we're probably not going to be taking live calls, but if you do have a question for Tony Joe, you can always go to prudentmoney.com. Go to the top of the page, there's a link that says Ask Prudent Money. We'd love to handle those for you. Obviously, I don't handle the Car Corner questions. I just pass them on because in that sense, I'm pretty much your assistant. They don't want me answering car questions like they don't want you answering money questions, Tony Joe.
I don't see why.
It's just not fair.
Don't take any wooden nickels.
Yeah.
Don't bet on the horses. I mean, that's good, sound financial advice.
Yeah, at some point you're going to get some new material. I really, I didn't mean anything by that, but.
Well, before we get started, I would just like to point out, Bob, that, this time of the year, I'm a little depressed. Usually you ask me, how are you doing? But you didn't today. So I'm going to share it with you anyway. I'm a little down. But the thing that keeps me going is there's only 126 days left till training camp starts.
Oh, yeah.
Those are my calculations.
Yeah. Yep. That sounds about right.
July 20th, and I am looking forward to it, but right now this is kind of a lull in the year for me.
Yeah.
I just work on cars and go home. But in 126 days, hope reigns victorious once again.
I've got one solution to that you can try out, and I think that you'll just absolutely get addicted to it.
And that is?
WNBA.
WNBA.
Never thought I'd say that, but...
Bob, I don't even watch the NBA. You think I'm going to watch the WNBA? Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying. I'm not a basketball guy.
Just a football.
And I'm really not a Lakers fan.
Yeah, well, that's your first problem. Yeah, if you do have a question for Tony Joe, go to prudentmoney.com. We're going to talk about what to do about these high gas prices. What are you seeing out there? I know that you pay attention to that probably a little bit more than I do.
Here's something I've noticed just in the past, maybe a year ago, maybe not quite even a year ago. I watched gas go up and down just simply because I drive home every night, same route. But there's a lot of gas stations on the way, and I've noticed, Bob, and I don't know if you pay attention like I do, but gas used to go up 2 or 3 cents.
All right.
Down 2 or 3 cents. But in the past at least 6 months, I've seen gas go from, $2.29 to $2.69 in one day. I'm like, wow, that's like a 40-cent jump. I've never seen the volatility in the prices. And now, just the other day, I believe it went from $2.89 to $3.49 overnight.
I thought I saw 3.53.
Yeah, you probably did because different stations, different prices. But I've never seen the tremendous jumps at, 40 cents a gallon in 24 hours just from last night until I go to work in the morning. It's just like ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a market there. There's a lot of volatility that's created, and it's the geopolitical issue that we've got. And this is a very, very, not to get all off in this, but this is a very interesting chess match that's going on here.
It certainly is.
Because if you look at it, they are holding us hostage, and there really isn't a whole lot. I keep thinking through this. What could you do to get out of that? Well, you can't bomb it. That's not going to do anything. That's not going to do it.
I'm just going to ask you. I know you're not into the oil pricing and market,
Right.
like, But do you have an answer for this? Because I'm confused, and I know there's a good reason. I just don't know what it is. My understanding is that we are the largest exporter at this point in time in the world, bigger than Saudi Arabia, bigger than anybody. We export more oil than any other country on the planet. We get oil from Canada, I know that. I'm just confused. Why is Iran, which we don't buy any oil from, why is that affecting our price? Do you know why that would be? It seems like we get our own oil from America.
They are cutting. They're affecting. It's real simple. It's affecting the price because it's cutting supply off. They completely cut 20% of the global supply off, taking it out of the market. So you can't. So there's a shortage of fuel, which raises the prices.
Okay.
The prices are going to raise a lot quicker because, just like you and I had this conversation, what do you do? I mean, the only thing that you could do is put troops on the ground, which is that's not a good optic, and especially we don't want to see that anyway.
Right.
So it's a real interesting situation.
Mm-hmm.
That I hope we don't see something just outlandish at the pumps. But once again, you wonder.
I know. I just don't know. Nobody knows. We're in uncharted territory.
I'll tell you something interesting, or else interesting that we can get to what we're going to talk about, is that the one answer was a couple of things. The one answer was, well, we'll escort the tankers through the Straits of Hormuz and get them there from one end to the other, 100 miles down the other end, and safely. There's not enough. Some of these passageways are so narrow, you just can't pull that off. Second thing, this is something that I couldn't find in the media anywhere. This last bit of oil, 172 barrels of oil that they took out of the emergency reserves today, puts us at the lowest level in history. If you'll think back to to Biden's administration, he used a lot of that oil up. Some valid, then some maybe not so valid, to keep the price of gas down. If you think about it, price of gas was so low during his administration was because I believe that a lot of that was tapping the reserves to supply and demand issue. Mm-hmm. So lots of moving parts, and boy, I tell you, it's a mess. Didn't see that. One of the things we talked about for a long time is you see all the risk out there, but you end up saying it comes down to what you don't see. Always comes down to what you don't see, and you catch yourself going, didn't see that coming.
Do you remember the stories? I'm not going to belabor this, but do you remember the stories in World War II where they had rubber drives and copper drives, effort for the war?
Vaguely.
Do you think that would? Well, I wasn't there either. I'm just saying,
right.
History. You read about it, and do you think it would ever come down to us really not being going back to an oil crisis like we had in years previous, where you'd have to fill up the reserves because of the war effort, and you'd have to just do without or ration that would really drive the price up.
Oh.
If we had to fill our reserves up out of necessity for some kind of a war effort, and everybody had to sacrifice, and you could only get so much fuel a week, rationing.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. If you take and you look at the entire global economy, fuel in reserve, emergency reserve, petroleum strategic fund, or whatever they call it. Mm-hmm. It's an unbelievable amount of oil that's put back. So, there's probably always ways to get oil. In desperate times. But, you start thinking, what are they thinking over there in China right now that they could just really disrupt things? What's Putin thinking about? And now you just this afternoon started to hear a little bit of conversation about, well, what is Putin doing to help out the Iranians?
Yeah, I don't know. That's It's not on our pay grade. It's way intelligence will never really have an access to it. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's talk a little bit about saving gas. I mean, what can we do? Well, that's one of them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I talked about, or I'm going to talk about on Monday, Tony Joe, is really how to look at inflation, look at the rise in prices, because when you think inflation because of a supply and demand issue of oil, you're hitting all these major appliances and petroleum, plastic.
Right. Everything just about depends on crude oil or transporting that product with
right.
diesel.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it affects
it's a big deal. So, but what you can control is the first on the list here is drive smoothly, avoid rapid and a lot of hard braking.
Right. You see, what people need to realize is that, and it's not always that they don't do it out of intent. They just don't have the knowledge. When I say they, I mean the listeners. We're going to try to explain. I will try to explain something to the listeners, and that is what burns fuel more so than normal is two factors, RPM and load. Now, RPM is very simple to understand. That's the gauge on your engine, that's the gauge called a tachometer on the dashboard, which most cars have now. And when you see that thing going really high, like 3,000 and 4,000, that means you're using way more fuel than you need to. The load factor comes into play when you accelerate on an on-ramp, and even you may not be really doing a lot of RPMs, but you're really working the engine. It may only be 2,500 RPMs, but you're putting it under a big load because you want to go fast, quick to try to fit in and merge with traffic. So if you try to reduce both of those factors, that is RPM and load, drive smoothly. I'm not saying like grandma, but don't accelerate hard and don't put it under a big load. And the reason for that is because you will conserve fuel that way. Makes a big difference in your fuel economy. And if you practice that procedure, you'll see a difference. But you've got to train yourself to do that because normal habits are not that way. But now that we're kind of in a really expensive fuel environment for cost of energy, then yeah, try to slow down, try to drive smoother.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. We're up against a break. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Tony Joe's here with me today, and we are talking about saving money on gas. You know, there's very few things we can't control. That we can control to a limited degree, but every little bit helps. I think when you start to look at dealing, positive ways to deal with inflation, it's about a lot of little things add up to one bigger amount, and if you can control your spending, which we'll be talking about on Monday, so make sure that you do join in. Cruise control, and by the way, just so that everybody knows, I am reading from a list that I got off of a resource, and Tony Joe doesn't agree with all these, and so we'll get to those as well, because I always like to hear when he doesn't. But let's talk a little bit about setting cruise control going on a highway. Is that a good idea? Tell us about it.
Okay, let me just explain. If you're on completely flat ground, then yes, you can use cruise control to maintain a steady speed. However, if you encounter a flyover or big hills, you're not right in Texas, you're down in the hill country, or you're in East Texas, cruise control does not really save you money. Let me explain why. When you're driving along without cruise control at, say, 65 miles an hour, and you start to go up a grade or a hill or a flyover or some incline, whatever it may be, it's better to not have it on cruise control. And as you climb up that hill and approach the top, reach the top of the hill and start to come down the other side, you're going to find out that normal people it'll actually slow the car down by the time they get to the top of the incline, and then they'll speed back up on the other side. You're not really giving it gas with your foot. You are just maintaining a steady foot pedal, and the natural occurrence would be for the car to slow down, lose a little bit of momentum by the time it reaches the zenith of the hill, and then you make it up coming back down the other side. That's better for your fuel economy. Now, with cruise control, here's what happens. You don't see it in the pedal, but you will go 70 miles an hour, and it'll want you to go maintain 70 all the way up that hill. And when it does, it's going to really pour the coals to it. It's really going to produce a lot of fuel consumption to keep the speed at 70, even though normally you wouldn't be going that fast, but it wants to keep the speed at 70. So when you're going up a hill, it's going to give it a lot more fuel. But you don't necessarily feel it in the gas pedal, but that's really what's going on under the hood. So I argue that point. It is not better in all cases to use cruise control to conserve fuel.
This is one that I don't think people really think about. Keep tires properly inflated. The lower pressure does reduce mileage. Before you comment on that, I was with it getting cold like it did. I know that one of my tires lost 5 psi just like that, and you always wonder why did it go down? There's no leak.
Well, I got kind of an analogy that I use for that. Now, here's what I would advise people to think about. Many people know this, and a lot of people may not know this, but let's say you put your car in neutral and it's not even running, and you get in the back, you try to push your car. Now, normal sized guy can usually push the car, but if you didn't know this, if you let air out of the front tire, 5 or 10 pounds, and now you have a low tire, and you get out and try to push that same car, it's going to take a lot more effort because there's more friction due to a low tire. So keeping the tires at the proper inflation level is crucial to getting better fuel economy. They were designed to have roughly 32 psi in the tires, and that makes the car easier to maneuver. There's less friction for that engine to power that car down the road. Now, here's the other thing that a lot of folks don't realize. When you go into the shopping, Kroger, whatever, and you grab a cart that really, I've done it a lot of times, but the wheels don't stay normal on the front. They're bent sideways, or they don't track like they should, the casters are off. It's very difficult to push that cart, and most people go, oh, let me get another cart, because it's difficult to push it. So the alignment on the car is somewhat important as well. The closest analogy I can come to is the shopping cart thing. We all know what that's like. Well, it's the same way with the car. Not as dramatic, but if the wheels are not aligned so they go straight when you want to go straight, it's going to cause more friction. More friction results in lower fuel economy.
You know, it also results in tires wearing out a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And tires are so expensive.
Yeah, just a sidebar issue. It also does a job on your tires, which are also made of petroleum, which are also going to be higher priced when gas goes up. But since we're addressing gas mileage problems, I just wanted to point that out. And yeah, you're right, Bob. Anything that is made from petroleum is going to go up.
Let's talk a little bit about, and it's just funny because you don't see these in a particular order that you think that you would, or the advice you're given on this resource, but it talks about replacing the dirty air filters as a top priority. Then it comes down a ways until it gets to changing your oil. And you said, be sure and say something about changing your oil, because believe it or not, that helps you save gas.
It's something that a lot of people don't realize. Oil changes are sometimes taken for granted. It's a good idea. We've harped on it for years about how to protect the internal parts of the engine by keeping the oil changed on time. But there's another benefit from that. Not only is it protecting your engine, but if you had really dirty oil and you had 6,000 miles and hadn't had an oil change, and if you were to check your fuel economy against all conditions being the same, then you get your oil changed, then check your fuel economy, it's going to increase your miles per gallon. Why? Because the friction of the engine is not as much as it was with dirty oil, and now the engine can run freer without as much effort, which in turn allows the car to go down the road freer without as much effort. So yes, changing the oil gives you better fuel economy. Keeping the oil changed on time is a way to keep the fuel economy as high as possible, along with the other factors that we discussed.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. If you have a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. I can't find this tip that I was looking for, but I know this advice drives you a little crazy. It says, don't let the car warm up or don't let it idle for very long.
Right. Okay, there's no argument from me versus the EPA that a car uses more fuel when it idles. Okay, it's not fuel efficient when you're idling. However, when they tell you, when I say they, usually it's the EPA. It's not the manufacturer. It's the EPA. Don't let your car idle. Just start it up and go. You don't need to warm it up anymore. That's not true. There are a lot of things that go along with saying that people don't understand, and I'm sure the EPA doesn't know it either. But starting the car in the morning, you need to let it warm up for a little while. How long? A minute, maybe. But the transmission fluid, some of the other things that are going along with the engine, they also need to be warmed up before you just jam it in gear and go. So on one hand, yeah, you do lose a little bit of fuel efficiency by letting your car warm up, but you save in the long run from destroying your engine, from not ever letting it warm up. And when you need a motor at 90,000 miles and it's going to cost $10,000, the EPA is not going to be there to help you pay for that. So just weigh that against your conscience. If you're a really green person and you don't want to let your car warm up, it's okay, but keep in mind what probably is going to happen in the long run. So you got long run versus short run. Yeah, you need to let it idle, in my opinion. You need to warm the car up still. So take that for only my opinion, but take that as advice to make a decision for yourself.
We have about a minute left, and one of the easiest things that you can do to get better gas mileage is go pop your trunk open and look at all of the stuff you're carrying in that trunk and what that is doing to your gas mileage. And nobody really thinks about that.
Right. And that's another thing I bring back to my analogy of pushing the car. Think about this. You get out, it's in neutral, it's not running, you try to push the car. If you put a whole bunch of weight in the trunk and you try to push the car again, do you think it's going to be easier to push or harder to push? It's common sense stuff. It's very easy if you have the knowledge and a little bit of an explanation and maybe look at it at that angle to understand that, hey, keep the tires inflated, make sure I don't carry excess weight unless I need to. I mean, if you're moving and you got to do a job, that's fine, but carrying it around all the time because you're too lazy to take it out of the trunk, that will save you in fuel economy. It'll save you money in the long run, and it's better for your car. So that's my advice about weight. Reduce as much weight as you can.
Yeah, and we're going to talk quite a bit more about this next week and talk about some of the gas coupon cards that you hear about it on the radio, and I've never really looked into it, but I'm going to look into it and come back and report to you on that.
Okay.
But still a lot to cover. We haven't even scratched the surface, and we'll get to that next week. This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.